What is up, YouTube? I still can't start videos. I can't keep using this joke forever.
Shout out to furries.
If we're not doing an introduction, then we're just jumping right in. Today, I have for you 5 pieces of furry lost media. Now, I know what you're thinking. Some of these things are not necessarily furry lost media. And you may be correct. Some of these things may not explicitly have come from the furry fandom. But these are 5 pieces of lost media which may be of interest to the furry fandom. Let's start all the way back at the beginning. The year is 1913. A silent film by the name of The Werewolf gets released. It was written by Ruth Ann Baldwin, directed by Henry McCrae, and starred Phyllis Gordon as the titular werewolf. It was supposedly the first werewolf film to be produced, and it was also the first monster movie produced by Universal Studios. So technically, the first Universal monster was in fact a lady werewolf. This and other werewolf films that came after it were, as far as people can tell, inspired by an 1898 short story by Henry Beaugrand titled The Werewolves. In order to avoid any sort of copyright issues, The Werewolf 1913 moved its setting to a Native American reservation and starred a Native American woman. Well, the character was Native American, the woman who played her wasn't. In 1924, Universal Studios suffered a fire that destroyed a ton of their silent films. And then in 1948, higher-ups at Universal thought that nobody was going to want to watch silent films ever again. And so the higher-ups at Universal decided to just get rid of the rest of their silent films. On purpose. As far as we know, The Werewolf is lost media. However, a full synopsis of the film does exist from a contemporary write-up concerning the film. If you want to check that out, that'll definitely be linked in the description. Flying forward more than 100 years into the future, we have, directed by Kevin Monroe, the Sly Cooper movie. Now, if you've never heard of the Sly Cooper movie, it's understandable why. Have you ever heard of the Ratchet and Clank movie? Basically the same people who were in charge of the Ratchet and Clank movie, which pretty notoriously didn't go over super well with critics or fans, they were put in charge of the Sly Cooper movie. In October 26, 2016, the director of this project, Kevin Monroe, tweeted that he hadn't worked on the Sly Cooper movie in more than a year and a half. The Sly Cooper movie was announced without a firm release date being given. A trailer was released for it, and that was about it. In 2017, the entire studio, Rainmaker, quits the project. And in June of 2017, a company known as Technicolor Animation Productions, who also worked on the Sonic Boom TV show, publicly announced that they were entering into a partnership with Sony to convert it into a 52-episode TV series with 11-minute episodes each. The TV series was then set for a 2019 to 2020 release, and that is the last that anyone heard of it, almost 6 years ago, where The Werewolf was fully produced and released and well received. This one, we're not even sure if it was completed. A trailer was released. We have no idea the extent to which the project might have been finished. Honestly, nobody's talked about it in 6 years publicly, so who knows what might ever become of it. The third one that I have for you, a CGI animated film known as Cat Tail, produced by Imagi Studios, which is an English-speaking Hong Kong company that was either intended for release in 2007 or 2010, depending on the source you look at. From what another YouTuber who looked into this more thoroughly was able to figure out, it seems like the film was probably about a cat being raised in a family of dogs. This would have taken place in a world completely populated by anthropomorphic dogs and cats, it seemed. That's not fair. There are some other animals in there, like storks, I think, and stuff, because like the stork delivers the baby. The reason we know this much about it is because there were 2 trailers released for the film. The studio working on the film got a pretty good amount of positive press from their 2007 film TMNT. 2 years later, they release a CG version of Astro Boy in 2009, which I had completely forgotten this movie existed. And apparently, so did most people as soon as they watched it, because the review scores for it, similar to what we were talking about with Ratchet and Clank, were really not good. In 2011, Imagi Studios declared bankruptcy. A man by the name of Brad Foxhoven bought the company. He was also involved with a company known as Blockade Entertainment, which was involved in both Ratchet and Clank and Sly Cooper. So, it all comes full circle. The trailers that appeared for it appeared pretty far back. We have no idea how much of this film ever got completed. There could be somewhere out there, at the very least, like storyboards or an animatic, if not a good chunk of the movie being done. Getting into some pretty obscure ones here. So the first 3 entries that I've listed today, I was able to find articles on the Lost Media Wiki or sources that catalog canceled projects. The last 2, I have not been able to find any mention of in any of those types of places. We have a game known as Dragon Spires. If you Google Dragon Spires, you might see that there are multiple versions of the game that are to varying degrees available online. So you might be asking, why is this included here? And what does this even have to do with Furry? The longest running MMORPG at this point is known as Furcadia. Of course, one of the longest running things in a particular field is Furry. It's been running since 1996, and work on it began in 1995. It is a project that was headed by Dragon's Eye Productions, headed by 2 developers known as Dr. Cat and Talzamir. This was not Dragon's Eye Productions' first project. 2 years prior, beginning development in 1993 and releasing in 1994, was Dragon Spires. Dragon Spires was, to an extent, a dry run for what Furcadia would become. And Furcadia was made explicitly furry. Dr. Cat, who I spoke to a little bit, told me that Dragon Spires was only ever like 2 rooms, wasn't a fully fleshed out thing. There wasn't even that much to do in it. It was mainly just a place to hang out with people. It's a DOS-based game that had no physical release because it wasn't a full game. It was discontinued in 1997, and multiple remake versions, almost exclusively in Java, were created over time by different people. Why did it go offline? The server host, without really informing Dragon's Eye Productions, turned off the machine at some point. They did not have a backup of the source code for it. On top of that, nobody that I am aware of, at least publicly, kept a copy of the client source code. That essentially means that the original version of Dragon Spires is lost, as far as one of its creators knows. I wanted to see, however, if anybody had been able to archive it after that. I looked into the very first remake of it that was in Java. That was headed up by 2 guys known as Motorhead and Mech. And you might actually know Motorhead more well nowadays by the name Slime Beast. I was not able to find any online footprint at all for Mech, but I was able to get in touch with Slime Beast. He told me that he found Dragon Spires in the mid-90s and played the original. When they found out that the game was kind of on its last legs, they decided to rebuild it in Java so that it could be run on machines that weren't DOS. He also told me that they reused what assets were available at the time. On top of that, they added a whole bunch of new functionality to it, meaning that in the long run, most of what they didn't have a whole lot to do with the original DOS version of the game. So even the people who were rebuilding the game didn't necessarily have any copies stored of the original code. I think it is safe to say that the source code, both for the server and the client applications of the original version of Dragon Spires, are pretty much gone. They're lost media. If anybody that might be watching this might have any copy of anything from the DOS version, let me know, because this is really fascinating to me, personally. The second to last one, I'm going to try to explain this in the best way that I possibly can, because this is something that kind of goes over my head. Prior to, and to an extent concurrent with, the early internet, there were multiple other ways of establishing networks between different computers and contacting one another. Things like Usenet, which is still around, but one other method of communication was the bulletin board system. A bulletin board system, as best I understand it, you would dial into it using your phone line. You could post on the bulletin board system, like an analog bulletin board, disconnect, come back a day later or so when everything was refreshed and when people might have replied to your postings, and there would be new postings. So it was kind of like a precursor to a forum in a lot of ways. The way in which you connected was directly to the one computer that was hosting the bulletin board, essentially, which meant that whenever you made that connection, you were only streaming that one page that you had loaded at any given time to your computer. Unless you specifically were downloading files, you never downloaded like a whole chunk of messages from a bulletin board. There were a lot of furry bulletin boards. The maybe most notable one was called the Tiger's Den BBS. It was moved to the Prancing Skilltear, a notable location for the early fandom. The bulletin board system was housed at the Prancing Skilltear for a good solid decade or so, since its closure in the mid-90s. As long as there's a server running it, just like with the internet, it is still there. However, because bulletin boards were run at such centralized locations, and there was usually only one or maybe at most a couple copies of the entire bulletin board, if that original host went offline, then that was pretty much it. That is more or less exactly what happened, as far as I can tell, to the majority of the early furry bulletin boards. The reason I bring up the Tiger's Den specifically is because they had what was called a quote-unquote storyboard on there as well, which was essentially a role-playing area called Furry Dance. It was like a club that people could come and hang out in and RP. I have been reading through some old issues of Yarf, which was a furry zine that ran from about 1990 to 2003. In the back of a lot of the earlier issues, they have the phone numbers to which you can connect to various furry bulletin board systems. In one of the early issues, there is a very specific note that says, due to a hardware change, everything that was on Furry Dance prior to a certain date is just completely gone forever. Most of the contents of these early bulletin boards are probably gone. There's a chance that somebody backed them up. Even if somebody were able to find archives of the Tiger's Den, those early entries on Furry Dance are completely gone and were known to be completely gone as early as 1990. I wanted to make this video to talk about all of these, but especially those previous two entries, because in both cases, I've never heard anybody talk about them before. Somebody may know something, and they might not even realize that they know something that is just kind of gone. All right, are you ready? The sixth entry, the sixth piece of furry lost media. It's my first stream on Twitch. That's it. There's no joke. But seriously, little did I know when I set up my Twitch account, Twitch defaults to not saving your VODs. That stream is just, it's completely gone. It's just gone forever. There's no way to recover it. If you're on YouTube, by the way, I stream on Twitch. Yeah, this is just a really ham-fisted call to action at the end of the video. Follow me on Twitch if you haven't already. The link will be down below. It's Princess Dank Official. That's gonna be it for today. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Like I said, if you know anything about any of these that was not discussed in this video, please drop it in the comments below. I'd be really interested to learn more. So, thank you all, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Shout out to furries.